So this Zoom session is being recorded and will eventually be loaded onto YouTube for anyone who wants to view the presentation later on. If you would rather not have your face as part of that video, if you participate, then take a moment and turn off your camera feed, and your microphone will still be on. We'll still be able to hear you. We'll still be able to see if you type a message in a direct message box, but it's totally up to you if you want to do that. Again, this is Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop. We are going to be hearing from 3 authors. I'm one of them. Dennis Royer. Bill Peschel is another one. And Sheryl Ickes is the 3rd author.
Yes.
The name of this presentation is called Next Chapters. And that's an especially appropriate, I think, time or title, because we really are all entering the next chapter of our life post-pandemic, and we're getting on with the next chapter of our lives. Now, as authors, we're already used to spending long hours in seclusion. You know, we were used to doing that already, writing and writing. But I have a question for everybody here, of the authors. Has a quarantine enabled you to write more? And what have you been working on writing during these long months of isolation? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the book that you're featuring today. Just want to know what we've all been doing. I'll go ahead and start this one. Yes, I've been writing, and actually it's been a lot of fun because there hasn't been a whole lot else to do. And so I've really been able to experiment and write a lot of other things that I don't normally write. I took a hand and crafted a literary fiction novel that's not ready, of course, to debut yet. It's in its rough form, but I've never tackled that before. To be honest with you, I never really thought I had the talent to do so, because literary fiction is a totally different ballgame, as you all know. It's not genre fiction, but I had a lot of fun doing it. It was a learning experience, and maybe in about a year or so, I'll be able to publish that one, and you'll all get a chance to see whether or not I've been successful at it. I've also written a sort of fantasy novel that I've never tried writing before. That one I will probably publish next year. At the moment, it's up on Wattpad being proofread by a whole host of other people that are helping me out with it. And my latest book, Geezer and the Widow, you can see it here, will be available for sale here in Debbie's Bookshop. And it's another Perry County mystery. And I don't ever seem to run out of ideas when it comes to Perry County mysteries. So that's what I've been doing. Bill, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing?
Well, since I got my golden ticket from the Patriot News in 2013, I've been a full-time author and publisher, so it's really not been that much of a difference. What it did do is, by killing all the book signings and the arts festivals and the book festivals, is that it cut out the 15 or 20 events that we would do. So that hit us on the bottom line, but it also meant we didn't have the time to pack and prepare and make sure we have the materials, that whole cycle of getting things done, which was really a shame, because we were looking forward to being at Malice Domestic, and we were going to be at Scintillations of Scions. We were going to try to be at festivals in New Jersey and Maryland, and that's what all went by the wayside. Other than that, it meant that because we have a line of 25 books, I was able to get more of them on Ingram Spark to expand the bookstore distribution. We republished books under our own ISBNs, and I got time to finish more books. We published Career Indie Author in September the year previously, 2019, and I got the quote book out just recently. That's a new book. And she has had one book edited in her Odessa Moon Steps of Mars series, and she's finished up a second one, and she's trying to get those polished and ready for people to read. So it allowed us to kind of focus more intensely on the things we were already doing. The only other thing is that we missed being in Hershey. We missed walking at night and hearing who's playing at the stadium, because it was easy to tell when Paul McCartney did first opening chords to Band on the Run. You say, oh, okay, that's what he's playing now. I missed that substantially.
Yep, and you were able to probably hear everybody screaming from the roller coasters too.
Oh yeah, yes. Screams of the damned. We can actually see the Fahrenheit coaster from our front lawn, so you can actually see people going up and down on it.
Yep. And how about you, Sheryl? What have you been up to during the pandemic?
Well, I work at a job that is considered essential at one spot. So I haven't really gotten a chance to isolate. So I've been steady during the whole thing. So to me, there wasn't much difference. But I have worked on a few books that are in my Slice of Life mystery series. And I just put the final touches and then gotten the new one I'll be talking about later uploaded and taken care of and ordered. So that's kind of where I am. I didn't get to, I would say, enjoy some of that because I had to continue to work. So, but all's good.
Oh, that's good. So have you been writing more, or have you been as prolific now as what you have been before?
Probably the same amount, because I work a couple jobs and you got family, you know how life hits kind of thing. So I've been writing where I can. So it's kind of didn't change. I have fit it in wherever I can.
Oh, that's good. That's good. The pandemic, as we've lived through it, a lot of people have asked, are we going to see a whole slew of books that have the pandemic in them? Are they going to be incorporated into the stories? So not necessarily applied to your featured book that you want to talk about today, but has the pandemic affected your stories? And do you have plans to include how it changed our lives into the plot of your present or your future stories? For example, are your characters going to be wearing masks? Are they going to be scrambling to find toilet paper? So, Sheryl, since you answered last, you want to field this one first?
Okay. No, I don't really have any intentions in bringing it into the writings that I have. Maybe if I decide to do a different course or a different style writing in the future, it may come back. The only thing is my new book deals with cross-country truck driving. And sometimes you scramble for toilet paper back then too. So that there. So to this day, if I go out to my car and I open the trunk, there is a roll of toilet paper in there.
Oh, you're lucky nobody knows about that, or they would have broken in to get it. How about you, Bill?
Since we deal a lot with material like annotating Agatha Christie's books, so there's no scope for that. Teresa has her science fiction romance series, so there's no room for that. If I do have a local oriented mystery series, I would like to get off the ground, and I would only do it really if it really played a central role in the mystery. If there was some way of doing that it plays a role in the solution or something like that. But the thing about doing something with immediate events is that in years to come, it becomes like a historical piece. And in fact, one of the books that I have on the stocks started writing it back in 2000. It's a space shuttle novel. And it's a historical novel now. When I write it, it's not going to be contemporary. I'm just going to say it's a historical now. Remember back in 2000 when the shuttle flight was on? That shows you how slow some of my book projects go.
Well, you're right. And it seems that what we think about as cutting edge right now, 20 years from now, we look back at it and it's like, oh, this really isn't germane anymore to what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that. I think this epidemic, though, there are certain things that are going to carry over for years to come. For example, this literary novel that I was working on that I've been telling you about, I decided that it would be post-COVID. I mentioned it, but it's a few years down the road when everybody's inoculated and COVID has gone away. We all pray that happens. But one of the carryovers in this book that I decided to incorporate is that people don't shake hands anymore. They're going to be bowing to each other Japanese style whenever they greet each other. And so that's one little subtle Easter egg that I put in there concerning COVID. And, who knows what we're going to see. I know the latest Harry Bosch novel, it was mentioned where Harry's talking to someone and he says, hey, there's something going on in China. There's some epidemic and it's spreading here to the country. And it didn't go beyond that. The author didn't go beyond that, but I thought it was interesting that, it's starting to pop up and appear in even the pop culture books that we're all familiar with. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our featured books. And we're going to try something new. There's 3 of us authors, and we've sort of decided that we're going to self-police and we're going to spend 10 minutes. And during that 10 minutes time that we each have, we're going to be talking about the book and reading an excerpt from the book. It's sort of our choice how long we want to read and how long we want to talk about it, but we'll try to stay within that 10-minute parameter so that this doesn't go on all afternoon. So,
Dennis,
yep.
Did Bob answer the question?
Bob, did Bob have a question?
Well, no, he had about it with about a pandemic affecting his stories.
We don't.
Bob, where are you at, Bob?
Right here.
Oh, okay, you're unmuted. Okay. How about you, Bob?
Well, I've been delaying, procrastinating a lot. This book I'm writing now should have been finished, last fall, and it hasn't. But I've been dealing with we have some cancer in my family, so that put a whole kibosh on a lot of things. But it's another Harry Thursday series, and so that which takes place in 1980. So there's no pandemic then. I don't think there was. No. But and there's no mention of polio pills or anything like that. Shots, no, nothing like that. So, but it's I'm hopefully getting this thing out and ready by summer. I'm excited. I want to start on another. I'm trying to diverge into more of a detective kind of thing. In fact, this book is not the third person. I don't know how it's all third person from Harry's point of view only. So I'm not going to the bad guy's lair and have them talking. It's all from what Harry's perspective is, and it's a big change for me. And my publisher warned me about doing that, but I'm doing it anyway, and it's a challenge. It's kind of fun too,
Yeah, you're a big rebel, aren't you?
Oh yeah, man.
Going against what your publisher wants. That's the way to go. Okay. All right. Well, back to you, Bill. Do you want to go ahead and get started on your book and tell us about it? And if you want to read an excerpt, feel free.
Okay, absolutely. It is. This is part of the complete annotated series, and we started out doing Dorothy Sayers' Whose Body, and we went on to Agatha Christie. And as each of these books come into the public domain, we've been releasing an annotated version, and we released one on Secret of Chimneys. So it's the complete annotated Secret of Chimneys. And it's allows me to, we've actually started becoming really good Agatha Christie experts, my wife and I, because, well, it's something you have to do. You have to learn more about the life and about the times. And I've been doing annotated books for like 10 years now. So this is the type of, because this was set in around the 1920s, we have been getting quite a self-education about those time periods, and of course conveying them to the audience. So what I want to do then is read not from the book itself, which is Agatha Christie. I mean, if you like Agatha Christie, you should be reading this. If not, I'm not going to convince you by reading the first chapter. Plus, also, all my work is in the footnotes. So that sort of thing does not work well, to read something and then stop and say, here's the footnote to that. So what we'll do is we'll end up reading an essay I wrote, because I wrote a number of essays in the back about Agatha Christie and her life, about reviews of Secret of Chimneys. There was also a Miss Marple episode, if you can believe that, of Secret of Chimneys. So I reviewed that and discussed Hatfield House, where it was shot, which turned out to be one of those places that has appeared in a lot of movies. This is one of those aristocratic homes that has been turned into a film production center, even though it's been owned by the same family for, you know, hundreds of years. They've actually turned it into something else. And unfortunately, my face is whited out because my screen changed. So we'll just have to ignore that. Just ignore that I'm turning into a ghost before your very eyes. I'll read from Agatha Christie in 1924, The Calm Before the Storm. And this is an essay I wrote about it that's in the back of The Secret of Chimneys. It was probably Agatha Christie's happiest year, which is not to say that it was a perfect year. But the shadows of the past were receding, her life had stabilized, and the future looked promising. This is about her husband, Archie. At the center of Agatha's life was her marriage to Archie Christie, but it was an unstable center, and it had been since their courtship. They had met at a dance, and Archie had taken command from the moment he saw her, when he demanded 3 dances and then 3 more. When she said she had promised dances to other men, he ordered her to drop them, and she did. He wanted to marry her from the start, and she wanted to marry him as well. He was dashing and handsome, and there was a vulnerability in him that she found appealing. But he was not earning enough as a second lieutenant, a pilot in training, to support a household, and her mother, Clara, opposed the union. They had had arguments and misunderstandings, and even one breakup. Only the declaration of war in 1914 and the prospect of Archie fighting and dying in the skies over France pushed them to marry. What some would consider to be warning signs, Agatha saw that they were fated to stay together. They saw little of each other until he returned home after the armistice. They set up a home together, and for the first time, her life was wine and roses. Agatha gave birth to a daughter, Rosalind, and published The Mysterious Affair at Styles and The Secret Adversary. In 1922, Agatha and Archie left Rosalind with Clara and Agatha's sister, Madge, and embarked on a world tour to promote the Empire exhibition, Archie as financial advisor, Agatha as his guest. It was a wonderful, exhausting trip of a lifetime. Back home, Agatha had 2 emotional storms to deal with. One was from her 3-year-old daughter. She had bonded with her aunt and grandmother and resented her mother's return. The other was Archie. Back in London, in their rented apartment, he needed to get back to work. Only there was none. He left knowing his job might not be waiting for him, and now that was confirmed. He needed to find another, and he felt humiliated day after day, going hat in hand to beg for work. His behavior strained their marriage. Archie always had been self-centered. He had wanted Agatha and pursued her with the same single-mindedness that he pursued flying, but he disliked weakness either in himself or in others, and his response to any expressions of pain or weakness was to turn inward and turn away. Empathy and comfort was not in his nature. Archie grew melancholy and irritable. As Christie recounted in her autobiography, if I attempted to be cheerful, I was told I had no sense of the gravity of the position. If I was gloomy, I was told, no use to pulling a long face. You knew what you were letting yourself in for. In fact, nothing I do seemed to be right. She tried to comfort him, but anything she did reminded him of his weakness. He wanted her to take Rosalind and stay with Madge or Clara, but she refused. In her Westmacott novel, The Burden, when Henry falls ill and his wife stays with him, there's an exchange that seemed to echo Agatha's situation. I don't want to leave you. I don't care whether you go or not. What use are you to me? I don't seem to be any use, she said. But his efforts to find work paid off. It wasn't an ideal situation. He knew that the owners were shady, and he even told Agatha, I'll have to be very careful so they don't leave me holding the can. But it was a job, and he could still look for a better position. In the meantime, Agatha breathed a sigh of relief. Next section, leaving London. During 1923, the Christie family were living in London. It was ideal for Archie's job, but that was the only advantage. Agatha grew up in Torquay, and she missed the clement weather and the clean sea breezes. She remembered when, to finish The Mysterious Affair at Styles, she accepted her mother's suggestion to stay at a hotel on Dartmoor, where she divided her time between writing and walking the hills. Archie too missed the country, but for a different reason. Agatha had introduced him to the game of golf, and the more he played, the more he loved it. The nearest place to play was in Croydon, a London borough where they reached by public transport. Archie yearned for a home with a course or two nearby where he could devote his attention to the sport, but they couldn't afford to move yet. Within a year, the opportunity arose. Archie landed a better paying, legally safer job, and they started hunting for a new home. And they found it in Sunningdale, a large village about 26 miles west of London. It had been home for city types commuting to London. To Agatha, the suburb looked cramped, and the people cautious in their socializing and, frankly, dull. To Archie, the men were like him, ambitious and businesslike. Best of all, they played golf, and Sunningdale had 2 courses with a high reputation. The Christies rented a large flat in a house called Scotswood. Even better, it had another flat which they rented for her mother to stay when she visited. The situation wasn't ideal, but it made Agatha happy because it made Archie happy. As Anne Bedingfeld noted in The Man in the Brown Suit, there is really nothing a woman enjoys so much as doing all the things she doesn't like for the sake of someone she does like. That's part of it. And let's face it, isn't that what real women really want?
No comment.
But that's what's funny about the book, about the books, is that her attitudes expressed in her characters reflected her attitude at the time. And this was a couple of years before the disappearance and before the divorce, and her attitude changed markedly after that.
Yeah, I think that all of us as authors, a little bit of our personality always goes into our writing. And, you know, I think that's just something that we can't avoid whenever we write.
Mm-hmm.
Sheryl, it's your turn. Tell us about your book and read a little excerpt for us.
Okay, well, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I have 2 cozy mystery series. And in case anybody's listening and they don't know what a cozy is, that's where you're going to have a story where you have a dead body, but it's not graphic in language, sex, or violence. And it usually continues on as a series. So in my first one, the Slice of Life mystery, I have 3 books right now. I have It Only Takes One Bite, Murder in the Woods, which I was fortunate enough to have this one win the category of cozy mystery at the American Book Fest. My third one is A Murderous Christmas, and that was named finalist at the American Book Fest. And this series takes place with Alexandra Jean Applecake. She's a cake decorator, and she owns and operates a Slice of Life bakery. So you get to meet her family and friends and go along with her adventures and such. And I have a 4th book, A Piece of My Heart, aiming to have it ready in September. And there's going to be a short story or novella called The Crunch of the Nutcracker, and that's going to be out by December 1st. But today I'm really here to show you my next series, and that is the Becky and Rufus Cross Country series. I have the cover hot off the press, literally. And when you look at the covers of my series for this one, you'll be able to know that, yes, I got the Becky and Rufus series. And let me guess what state they might be in. In the background is a picture from the actual state. So in this case, there's the Smoky Mountains in the background. Each one is going to have that little square in the center that depicts a scene from the story. The name of this book is Death of a Dispatcher, and that kind of describes the scene right there. And then at the bottom, there's going to be a tractor trailer. So again, that'll be on the bottom of every one of my books. And when you look on the trailer, you'll be able to see the state that the story takes place in this case, Tennessee. My goal is to have each book come from a different state. So that'll be interesting, I think. This actually takes place with Becky and Rufus Bridgewater. They are a team operation for a trucking company. They're married. They own their trucks, so they're called owner operators. And in this story, they have to return to Smoky Gorge, Tennessee, because their company is merging with another one. So they have to get new paperwork and signage for their truck. And they're going to spend a couple of days catching up with some friends of theirs and such. And of course, Becky this time just happens to find a much despised dispatcher dead in the office, and she quickly becomes the prime suspect. So her husband Rufus and their friends get together and help her to at least try to clear her name. So I'm going to be reading a small section, a little excerpt out of the book. And in this case, it's with 3 female truck drivers. We got Becky, the main character, a longtime friend of hers, Winnie, and a new friend that they've met, Ember. And they're going to introduce her to a family that lives behind the main terminal down in Smoky Gorge. Says Becky looked around. Are you ready? Winnie smiled. She lifted her hand and lightly wafted a paper in the air. Ready. Ember, have you met the G-Hog family? Becky asked the slightly bewildered woman. She looked back and forth between the 2 ladies. No, remember, I just got here. If you're free for a few minutes, you can join us, Winnie said. We're delivering some mail to them now. Is it far? Ember said. No, just on the back side of our main building, Becky replied and grinned. I've checked this facility out fairly well. I don't remember seeing a road on that side of the building, let alone a house, Ember stated. I did see a wonderful old water tower. As the ladies rounded the back corner of the building, Becky observed Ember looking around. Becky said, you're thinking way too big. They walked towards a shed with a 4-foot bump of ground covered in grass near it. When the group walked between the bump and the shed, Winnie reached into her back pocket and pulled out a small postcard. Becky pulled a small letter from her jacket pocket and handed it to Winnie. Ember laughed. G-Hog family means groundhog family. Got it. But this just shows that you people are a bit off plumb. This time she grinned at their quizzical looks. It means that you guys are not right. You're definitely a bit warped. I'm good with that, Winnie replied, and Becky nodded in agreement. The 2 older ladies laughed. Along the base of the right side of the metal shed was an entrance to a groundhog hole, and there was a small mailbox measuring roughly 4 inches in length, 2 inches in width, and 2 inches high, magnetically attached to the shed to the left of the hole's entrance. Their boss, I take that back, Becky's husband, Snowy, that's Rufus. Snowy was having some fun, Becky responded. Angus, that's the owner of the trucking company, has grandkids. And when they visit, they always check out this spot. So Snowy added this and they absolutely love it, Becky said, and stopped to check out a wind chime that was hanging from the one corner of the shed by a metal hook. Light chains of varying lengths hung from a metal circle that was suspended by wire to the hook. Tubular metal teardrops hung from the end of the chains, and each teardrop had a different small, thin metal animal shape dangling within. She slightly brushed it with her hand and enjoyed the delicate music it produced as the varied metal pieces hit each other. Her smile disappeared when she detected another sound and tried to figure out its source. Winnie squatted down as she spoke. Uncle Phil and cousin Gus from Pennsylvania send mail. Sometimes a couple of the drivers here will send postcards from different parts of our country to the G-Hog family in care of the trucking company. We periodically send mail too, Winnie added as they put their mail in the box. Awesome. I'll keep that in mind, Ember replied. She lowered her voice as she noticed Becky's somewhat distracted countenance. Shh. Becky quietly hissed as she heard and saw some people approach on the other side of the shed. The ladies ducked behind the far side of the grass bump. We need to find where Brandon hid that one part, a masculine voice stated. That jerk. Without that part, the thing doesn't work, a different masculine voice complained. It doesn't help that we know where the rest of the other boxes are. You sure he didn't say or even hint at its location? A third male voice inquired. Yes. He was quite tight-lipped on the subject. I can tell you that it's not at his apartment. Since I didn't know what size item to look for, I tore the place apart looking for anything and everything. We only have until Sunday to find it or we lose the buyer, the one man stated. Darn that, Brandon. Someone kills him and shafts us all. A cell phone started to ring and one of the men grabbed for his phone and turned the ringer off. Before he quieted the phone, Becky's cell phone started to go off and she struggled to shut it off quickly. Do you think they heard it? She whispered. The other ladies shrugged their shoulders and listened apprehensively. I have to get back, the one masculine voice replied. Okay, one of the other men answered, a bit distracted. You go. We need to check something out. He shook his head towards the shed a couple of times and he lowered his voice to a whisper. I think there's someone on the other side. Let's go. Becky did not like the sudden silence. The ladies leaned in close. Let's separate and meet in the driver's lounge in the main building. Each lady nodded her head and took off in different directions. Ember quickly took off towards the back of the property and went left into the tree line. She accidentally kicked a rock into a tree and quietly cursed at the noise it made. As the men came around the shed, they heard the noise. One of the guys smiled, tapped his cohort's shoulder, and took off after her. Winnie ducked low and ran off to the right of the grass hump. She figured she'd get to the side of the building as fast as she could and opened the door and hoped the door would not be locked. Becky said a quick prayer for protection and slowly circled her way around the grass hump, keeping an eye behind her. When she got back to her starting point, she quickened her pace to the far end of the hump again. She smiled as she watched Winnie get to the side door and enter it. Her smile quickly faded as a small shadow emerged from the tree's bigger one and hurried to the same side door. Becky decided it was best to get in behind him. As she ran to the building, she looked around her and saw no one. She checked her phone and it was dead. I'm definitely out of shape, she told herself. Just before she entered the building, she stopped and tried to slow her breathing. Forget it. Winnie might need me, raced in her mind. Winnie had looked around in the dimly lit corridors. Her eyes quickly adjusted to the low lighting that was used in the areas of the building not normally populated after 3. Her pulse quickened as she heard someone enter the building and close the door with the lightest of clicks. She hurried down the walkway between the office cubicles to reach the safety of the driver's area. Her sense of relief when she was about 6 foot from the door she needed quickly fled as a strong hand grabbed her left upper arm and brought her to a quick stop. Where do you think you're going? A man's voice hissed in her ear. And hopefully you'll buy my book and find out what happens next. So back to you, Dennis.
Very good. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You may have answered this, but I listened and I heard that Becky's husband is named Snowy. How did he get that name?
Well, Snowy, one thing in trucking, you have your real name, which is Rufus, and then he has what's called a handle for the CB, Snowy. And sometimes truckers will use those names off the CB radio also. And Snowy is an early, what I want to say, his family is predispositioned to getting white hair early. So where he's only in his 50s, his hair is totally white, makes him look a little bit older.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
My book is Geezer and the Widow. It is a Perry County mystery. I have written a series of these mysteries. I don't know where all of you who are attending come from. You could be from anywhere in the country. So I'll just say that Perry County is in Pennsylvania. It's a very rural county. There are only 2 stoplights in the entire county. So it makes for some interesting characters, a different type of culture than we have right across the river in Harrisburg, which is a bigger city. So that's reflected in my novels. This is a cozy, just like what Sheryl was talking about. The difference is there's no murder involved in this one. It's a disappearance that we're writing about. And the tagline, the log line rather, is when a widow struggling to raise a child with Down syndrome discovers evidence her dead husband might still be alive, she convinces a grumpy former private detective to come out of retirement to track him down. So that's the premise of the book. And I'm going to read for you the first chapter, which is where my widow and my grumpy former detective meet for the first time. And it isn't very nice meeting. Art Presley possessed a lifelong aversion to minding his own business. That particular character trait served him well back in the day when he had been a private detective. Sticking his nose into the affairs of others allowed him to uncover dark secrets, leading him to solve many tough cases for his clients. As a result, he enjoyed a long, lucrative, successful career. At the age of 68 and retired for 6 years, Art had mellowed and adopted a live and let live attitude. Abusive behavior, though, still triggered him. Despite his age, he wouldn't abide nastiness. Walking through the refrigerated section of the supermarket, Art inspected the expiration date on a container of yogurt. He wasn't fond of the stuff, but needed to change his diet. During his annual physical, the doctor told him he was in great shape for his age, but his cholesterol levels were inching higher. Other than a mild case of hypertension and a bothersome overactive bladder, he felt fit as a 40-year-old. Instead of the usual bacon and egg sandwich on English muffin he always fixed himself for breakfast, he decided to make an effort to try eating healthier. Satisfied the yogurt was fresh enough, he set the container into his handheld shopping basket. From the next aisle over, he heard a child erupt into a tantrum. He sighed. Young parents these days had no clue how to control their little ones. His two adult children, Jen and Stephen, knew better than to act out when they had been kids. He and Ellen taught them discipline and respect from the time they could walk. Rounding the corner into the cereal aisle, he spied the misbehaving child and a woman he assumed was the mother. The kid, a boy of about kindergarten age, had the facial features of a child with Down syndrome. He screeched while reaching his little arm toward a box of sugary cereal his mother proceeded to return to the shelf. "It's not good for you. Besides, it's too expensive. We can't afford it," she explained to the child. The woman shouldn't bother with an explanation. She should just say no to the kid and move on. Art pulled a box of granola from the shelf with the intent of mixing in a few teaspoons of the cereal with his yogurt. He figured it would make the bland tasting goo a little more palatable. The shelf started shaking. What now, an earthquake? Art turned and found the boy kicking the cereal display. He appeared angry over not getting his way. "Hell's bells," Art mumbled. "Stop it," the kid's mother said, her voice raised. She grabbed the boy by the shoulder and knelt down to get at his eye level. "You're embarrassing me, Joey." It took every ounce of Art's willpower to stay out of it. Didn't this woman know you couldn't reason with a young child? Did she think the kid cared one whit he was embarrassing his mother? If it were his son, he would turn the boy over his knees and give him a quick smack on the behind. It wouldn't hurt the child, but would serve to get his attention. A few shoppers rolled their carts down the same aisle, smiling with sympathy at the woman, but otherwise making an effort to ignore the confrontation. By now, the disruptive boy was climbing up the shelves, reaching out for the cereal box his mother had just put back. She grabbed his arm and pulled the boy down from the shelf, using what Art thought was excessive force. The boy stumbled and fell. "I said no," she shouted. The little boy began screaming. Art shook his head and started to pass them by when the kid's mother snaked out an arm and slapped the child across the face. One of the other shoppers, a woman dressed in a business suit, gasped and held a hand to her mouth. "Enough," the mother yelled and raised an arm as if to strike the child again. The little boy shrank back, wide-eyed, his jaw trembling. Art dropped his grocery basket and grabbed her wrist. "Hey, how would you like it if I slapped you like that?" The woman turned his way, her eyes wide in shock. She struggled to free her wrist from his grasp. "Let go of me, asshole." "Not until you calm down." She tried pulling away, but he wouldn't release her. She shouted, "Someone call the police. This man is restraining me against my will." A teen boy appeared holding a cell phone, videoing the scene. Oh, hell's bells. Art let go of her and took a step back. The woman made a big show of rubbing her wrist where he had grasped her. The little boy had gone quiet and looked at Art in apparent fascination. "You hurt me," the woman whined. Her eyes glistened. He scoffed. "What, you're going to cry now? How typical." In his experience as a PI, he often found how abusers could dish it out, but they played the victim when the tables were turned. "You crossed the line by slapping this child in the face." He pointed at the boy. "You can see where you hurt his little cheek." Every shopper in the aisle looked at the kid and the pink mark on his face. He hoped the teen with the phone zoomed in. The woman folded her arms across her chest. "Nobody asked you to butt in. When an adult is beating on a child, I consider it my obligation to butt in." She unfolded her arms and waved one of those slender fingers under his nose. "Who the hell do you think you are? How dare you judge the way I discipline my son? You call slapping your son in the face appropriate discipline? It's obvious you lack proper parenting skills. If you like, I can give you some advice." Her face went beet red. "You self-righteous bastard." Being cursed at and called names didn't bother Art. He let the name calling roll off his back. He'd been called worse. Still, he couldn't help puffing up his chest. "I have 2 grown children who turned out to be productive members of society, so I know a thing or two about proper parenting. Thank you very much." She sputtered for a few moments before saying, "Not that it's any of your business, but I have a 30-year-old daughter who is also a productive member of society. I'm no first-timing at parenting either." Confused, Art tried breaking down what she said. He had pegged her as someone younger. If she had a 30-year-old daughter, it would make her at least 48. That is, if she had been pregnant with her daughter as young as 18. She might even be older. How would it be possible, a woman maybe in her 50s having a little kid? Possible, but rare. It would explain the boy having Downs. Older parents ran a higher risk of producing a Downs child. She wasn't his grandmother because she had called the boy her son. Giving her a closer look, he noticed fine wrinkles at the corners of her mouth and eyes and gray strands mixed in her auburn hair. "What's going on here?" Art heard from behind him. He turned. A uniformed, brawny female police officer strutted up the grocery aisle toward them, her thumbs tucked into the front of her utility belt. "This man assaulted me," the woman said. Her eyes glistened anew, and she wore a pout as if struggling to hold back tears. The witnesses scattered, including the teen who had videoed the incident. The officer regarded him, her hands now hung loose. She unbuttoned her handgun holster. "It doesn't sit well with me when a man harasses a woman." Marvelous. An overzealous female cop thinking she was protecting the virtue of one of her sisters. "Look, I was just trying to stop this lady from using excessive force on her child." He pointed to the boy who now held on to his mother's hand, behaving like a little angel. The pinkness on his face still showed, but had subsided. "That's not the way I see it," the officer said. She grabbed her wrist and slapped on a handcuff. "You're under arrest." So that's my chapter 1. And eventually these two get together and they have to find her missing husband. So now I'm going to move on. I have a question for each of our authors, including myself. Bill, your annotated series has been educational to those of us not familiar with the culture and references of Agatha Christie's era. Can you tell us a little bit about the research involved that enabled you to enlighten us about her world?
Well, there's quite a lot that has to be done. And over the years, I've had to develop a number of skills in order to find the information we need, because it's really, I'm looking for information that goes beyond just the surface happenings of history. We wanted to know how these people live, how they work. And there came about a number of resources. Fortunately, the internet being the first one, because I would not have been able to do this without the internet. It certainly would not have been as easy, and certainly not being able to do it from my desk in Hershey. It's far easier now. I can look at digitized newspaper projects. The Library of Congress has one. There's a British version of it. The Australians have one as well. There's also Google Books, which has a lot of references that I can look up. And the Hershey Public Library with their wonderful interlibrary loan program. I've gotten to be very close. I wouldn't be friends, but Denise and I have a long conversations sometimes about the things we have asked her to get. And she has been absolutely, she's been a bulldog for me, sniffing out. She sniffed out microfilm rolls of newspapers from the Columbus Public Library for a James Thurber project I'm working on. She's anything in the US she can get. And fortunately, she's been able to get university publications as well. And in fact, this is one side effect of the COVID pandemic, is that there is a online service, Project Muse, which apparently makes university publications available, usually through a subscription service. But as a result, they have put a number of books. A lot of the libraries got together, including University of Pennsylvania, Notre Dame, and put their university publications, their books, actually available for free as downloadable PDFs. And I ended up downloading books on Hollywood, on Chinese representations in the media, history, sex, politics, presidents, all these for projects that are in the works. So it's been very useful developing these kinds of skills, and also being able to reach out to experts in certain fields like Sherlockians when I was doing the 223B casebook series of Sherlock Holmes parodies and pastiches. There's a number of members of places like the Baker Street Irregulars who were fascinated to receive a pleading email from me saying, "Can you help me find this particular parody that hasn't been seen in 100 years?" And that's been my work for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very interesting, reaching out to all those folks, and they're probably just as thrilled to hear from you as you are to hear back from them. That you have such an interest in doing this work.
Mhm.
And oh, thank you for shouting out to the libraries. I know they've been very helpful, the ones that were able to stay open, during this pandemic. And what would we do without our libraries? They play such a service to the community.
Yep.
Sheryl, you draw on your experiences as a trucker in Death of a Dispatcher. Can you give examples of some real life experiences that maybe you incorporated into your story?
Yeah, in Death of a Dispatcher, there's a couple ones. Towards the beginning of the book, one of the other truckers who goes by the name Ghost, he's tending to the front end of his truck. And when my main characters, Becky and Rufus, come up to him and ask him what happened, he kind of explains something hit it. I don't want to give too much away because you get to get the book and read it, but that happened to my husband. He's still a truck driver. And so I get some really cool stories from him. But what happened to Ghost Truck happened to he was only working for that company about a year when it happened. It just adds a little humor to it in a way, because nobody was injured and the truck wasn't seriously injured either. There's another spot. My dad was a truck driver and he taught me to drive. So at one spot, he showed me how to reseat a tire using ether. I mention it briefly in the book. I do not give directions because you got to know what you're doing if you're going to do it, because it involves ether and fire and such. So, but I touch lightly on that because there's an older truck driver in the book who does it, and it is not a quiet thing to do. And then when I was reading that part about the G-Hog family and having a mailbox, there is a G-Hog family in Harrisburg that has their own little mailbox, and my husband has a really good sense of humor. So those are three that are in there. I have some interesting ones to add when I do a book on Arizona, as well as a number of other states.
Good. Earlier, Bill mentioned how Agatha Christie may have incorporated some of her own personality and quirks into her writing. And I mentioned that those of us who are authors, we can't help but to do that at times. And my wife tells me that this story that I wrote, Geezer and the Widow, is me, because I incorporated a lot of myself. And yeah, I draw on my experiences as an old geezer in this book to sort of give life to my protagonist. And I have some examples of real life experiences that happened to me that I incorporated into the story. And it sort of describes how my character has trouble adapting to the changing modern world. One of them has to do with this whole holding the door thing. Now, I was raised to be a gentleman, and I hold the door for ladies whenever I have an opportunity to do so. I don't care how old they are. I'm not flirting with them. I'm just doing it out of courtesy. And of course, one time I did it and I got scolded for it. This lady said, "I can hold my own damn door," and I'm thinking, sheesh, I'm just trying to be polite. What's wrong with this? But I guess in this Me Too society, that's a no-no, and that's forbidden. So that's incorporated into my book, where my character did that and he got called out for it. And then there's some little cultural things that are happening that I have to scratch my head over. I remember the first time I went into a Starbucks, and this was a long time ago. And I said, "Yeah, I want a large coffee." And the waitress, oh, by the way, they're not waitresses anymore, they're baristas. When did that happen? How pretentious, why don't they just call themselves waitresses? But anyway, the waitress behind the counter, the barista, said, "Oh, a large, that means you want a venti." I said, "A venti?" I'm there. "Well, if that's a large, then I suppose that's what I want." She goes, "Yes, a venti is a large, a grande is a medium, and a tall is a small." I'm there. "Oh, well, in my world, a small is a small, and a medium is a medium, and a large is a large. And by the way, in Spanish, grande means large. So how can that be a medium? Where are you folks coming from that you're causing these labels that you put on things?" So that's one of the little quirks that I also incorporated into my story. And if you read the book, you'll find that there are some more in there, and maybe those of you who are older can identify this and get a few laughs out of some of the things that I have in here. We're going to go to audience questions now, but before we do so, I want to again give a shout out to Debbie Beamer and the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop, who is hosting this event. I've heard that maybe the first part of this presentation was not recorded, so I want to make sure I get that in there, that Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshops will be selling all of our books, and please support your independent booksellers. We've lost a lot of our businesses as a lot of the pandemic, and fortunately, Debbie has been able to keep her store open. So it's especially important that we support our small businesses and Debbie's store in particular, because she's good enough to host this event and to keep selling all of our books for us. So now that I've got that out of the way, is there anybody out there that has any questions? You can type in your little message box if you have questions, and all of us will be able to see them. And if it's directed to one of us in particular, we can answer it, or you can just ask a generic question for all of us authors and any one of us can jump in. I'm not seeing any questions. Sheryl or Bill, do either of you want to pipe in with anything?
Unfortunately, I am drawing a blank at the moment, although I will add on to the back of that about supporting bookstores, because this is something we authors do as well. I mean, I try with Deb, but she's very generous, but at least with Cupboard Maker Books and some of the other institutions, that's the first thing authors should do is buy from the stores. You know, that's always good advice as far as talking about networking with bookstores. You go in and you buy a book, you buy whatever you like, and there's got to be something that you like. If there is not, you shouldn't be writing books in the first place. And that's a great first step because it shows you want to have skin in the game. I couldn't advise that more so. You know, you have to give in order to receive.
I had a question from Dorothy here that is asking, are all of our books in the store now? Yes, mine is in, and I guess Sheryl, yours is going to be in starting Monday, right? From what you told me earlier.
Yeah, it should be. I had it all planned and scheduled that I'd have my book in hand. And when I double checked when it was supposed to arrive, they told me next weekend. So we investigated a little bit. They won't tell me why it got held up. They said everything was done, but for some reason they had changed the delivery date. And then last night, I don't know if it's the squeaky wheel getting the oil or what, but apparently my books will be here Monday. So anybody wants to, you can place orders online. You can wait and call us in here at the bookshop and order them then. We are open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 12:30 to 5:30. So we will get the orders out to everybody as soon as we can. But my books are supposed to be here Monday.
Right. And how about you, Bill? Yours here in the store?
As I understand it, yes. And I saw there was a question there about personalizing books too. Call the bookstore. We'll be happy to personalize books any way you like. I have books at home on the shelf, so it's certainly possible for me to personalize the books anywhere and give them to Deb and she'll ship them out to you.
Great. Yes, all three of us live very close to the store, so it's easy for us to come in and personalize them for you. Bob, I see you asked whether you can talk instead of typing. I invited you to unmute, but I don't know. Okay. Are you unmuted now? I can't tell. Well,
Now, is that better?
oh, there you are. Go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. Bill, excuse me for not knowing more about your works, but when you're writing about like Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes, are you writing stories in their likeness, or are you writing about their stories?
It's a number of different things. With Sherlock Holmes, there were a number of parodies and pastiches written by people other than Conan Doyle. And there had been a few collections. Otto Penzler has a wonderful collection of Sherlock Holmes pastiches. And I decided to actually, and this is where passion projects really run away from you, where I decided to start collecting them from the Victorian era and creating anthologies of them. And they were footnoted and annotated. And what I thought would be, oh, just 4 books turned out to be 7. And I'm doing another one with James Thurber's parodies, which are very little known, and a best of collect. This turned into a 10-year run of just covering Conan Doyle's lifetime from 1888 to 1930. And it became this massive historical project because I was also writing mini bios that went in there from year to year about Conan Doyle's life. So you look at, say, the Second World War I book, which actually runs from 1915 to 1919. And there's, 4 essays in there. And then whenever, because some of these people are thoroughly unknown, I tried to find whatever I could about them online. And this is where, getting back to the research, there was one in particular in one of the volumes by a high school student, Nan Gillespie, that appeared in the Lansing, Michigan high school yearbook. And I got it, and not Nan Gillespie, but Gillespie was her last name. And I ended up, because I was able to look through census records and the yearbooks and newspapers, I actually was able to trace her life in Lansing, Michigan, all the way until she retired in like 1958, and find a photo of her from that time. Now, the Agatha Christie's are all annotated novels. They're Agatha Christie's words annotated by myself. So if you ever seen like the annotated Mother Goose, the annotated Alice in Wonderland, that's exactly the types of books those are. The only original things I did was I wrote a series of pastiches featuring Mark Twain and Sherlock Holmes. And that's published in the Casebook of Twain and Holmes. And that's an act. I put some in the Casebook series, but I also published a separate version myself, which I actually have over here. So I actually published it with some mocked up illustrations that I mocked up myself, and I even used the wallpaper. There's Denny Dobry, who is an actual Sherlockian up in Allentown, who actually built Sherlock Holmes's sitting room, and he's a member of the local Sherlock Holmes Society, and actually visited his place and took a picture of his wallpaper and mocked it up as part of the cover. So this is where the fun in self-publishing means you can do, silly things like that because it entertains you.
Right. Rich Kieselowski. Hi, Rich. I haven't seen you in a long, long time. So it's good to see your name up there again in your picture. Your question was, have sales increased or decreased over the last year? I'll speak for myself on this. One would think that maybe sales would increase because people don't have anything to do, and they're going to be reading more. I have found that's not been the case with me. I've taken a big hit over 2020. I suspect it's because I'm not able to get out, do presentations. I'm not doing book signings. I'm not doing any marketing just because I couldn't. This is the first presentation I've done since the fall of 2019. So I don't know whether everybody's just been watching Netflix or what, but at least in my case, my sales have gone down. How about the rest of you? Sheryl, have you had increased sales?
I had a little bit, not big, as you said. I was really hoping that this last year was going to be my time when I really pushed. I have a few of the handout things that, buy my book, you can get this little thing or that. I had it all lined up, wanted to line up a couple extra places that I was going to go out and do meet and greets. And then the coronavirus did kind of shut us all down there. For those of you who don't know, I do work at the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop. I don't push my books. But if someone inquires on a certain book and I just happen to have written it, then I can do a little bit of a sales pitch on that. And sometimes they buy it, sometimes they don't. But there's been a few sales that way, but again, not huge. It's just, I think it's the way it is. And I'm self-published also. So getting my name out. That's what I've been slowly working at. And the coronavirus has kind of slapped me down a little bit. So I'm hoping this year I can really try to get out there a bit more. And I will try to do something that maybe gets on media a little bit more and try to go that way, because I believe there's a lot of meet and greets that are still going to be virtual. So I can't wait until we can get out and meet everybody. But there's been a slight increase.
Okay. And Bill?
The sales, well, the sales have gone down, but I've had done some other things as well. There was some consulting I did on a book. We did some editing. There was a teaching, one class that we taught on the business side that at another bookstore. So that actually we ended up actually balanced out. But exactly like Sheryl, we were ready. We were going to buy these, special stands, and we were ready to go out and hustle. And yes, the shutdown really killed that. We were actually hoping to, make another jump to the next level, and instead we were able to flatline, just because because we're self-published, we were able to do ads in some places. We had some good luck with some special deals. So we ended up balanced out for the year.
Okay. There was one more question up there, and it's for Sheryl, and that's, do truckers still use CBs?
Yes, they do, though I hear that maybe not as much because cell phones are being used, but and it's been a number of years since I drove truck, but to me, that would still be the way. When you're going cross country, you don't know the truckers that you're passing. So they can communicate back and forth and let you know if there's an accident up the way and such like that. But if you know the truckers from your company you want to talk to, so there's a little bit more cell phone usage. But I've been trying to pay extra attention to the truckers that are going by me. They got the CB antennas. And also we do have more foreign truckers out there. So I do know that not everybody speaks English that well. So there's going to be a little bit of issue there. But again, it's a great way to call for help if you need help. So I do know that some's out there, but I've heard conflicting info about just how much they're being used right now.
So our non-English speaking friends are probably going to have a lot of trouble with the lingo that truckers use over their CDs as well.
They can, yes. And just be extra careful around. I do want to do a shout out to all truckers. I do have that on one page in my book at the beginning, thanking all truck drivers for everything they do. And they do give a lot of their time because they're out on the road. So if you look around, if you own it, use it, wear it, a trucker had something to do with it, you getting it. And a thank you to the families, because they're missing that person at home kind of thing. So they do a lot of sacrifice of that also. And especially cross-country truckers, you don't get to enjoy a number of things that the families do all the time, like birthdays and everything. When my husband and I were cross-country, we had to, like when we got married, some people got upset that I knew when my bridal shower was. It was supposed to be a surprise. Well, it just happens to be that if we wouldn't have known about it, I would have been in Texas at the time. So I just wanted to put that shout out, though, that I do thank truckers for helping. And watch out when a truck, with these GPSs that everybody's using, some rely a little too heavy on the GPS. So especially in the Carlisle area, we've had some tractor trailers go under a bridge they're not supposed to go, and they don't fit and they get stuck. So just be a little more aware of that. And maybe if a truck's going to start to go under, they realize it's an issue, that give him space to back out and such like that. And that's just my little commercial for trucking.
Well, that's well said. Sheryl, are we allowed to go over? We're a little bit over right now. We have one more question. So this is from Julie. First of all, she's thanking, on behalf of ladies, she's thanking gentlemen and for holding doors. And she appreciates that we're still being gentlemen. And she wants to know if any of us have our books on audio books and what's involved in turning your book into an audio book. I do not. I've looked into it and it's expensive. So that's sort of what has stopped me from doing it. How about you, Bill? Any plans to go audio with your series?
Well, we've thought about it. We wouldn't want to do it like for the annotated because the footnotes just interfere with the narrative. With the we have, my wife has has books, Fed Safe and Sheltered, and the Odessa Moon stuff, and I was thinking about the Sherlock Holmes one of just doing it myself as a storyteller and not as a voice actor. I mean, we already have microphone, we have Audacity. I've actually done some tests, but again, it takes time to do that. It's like you said, it is expensive if you're hiring a narrator. If you're doing it yourself, you have to spend 40 hours to put it together. Apparently it's like 4 hours to get an hour's worth of audio.
Wow.
That's how long it takes, because you want to be mellifluous, you want to be spoken correctly, and if you make a mistake, you got to go back and fix it. So no, I'm afraid not, but I'd love to see more of it though.
Cheryl, how about your melodious voice? Do you have plans to go audio?
Not for me personally, though my trekking series, I have started to look into that. I had a self-published author tell me one way to do it. My husband has a great voice, so I was going to see if he'd be interested, though he did mention that it was going to take quite a bit of time. And so that's the one thing I'm looking at, but I am aiming to have my trucker series first as audio and then maybe the other series. So I'm seriously looking into it.
Yeah, there are some of us who are independent have tried the podcast route, where it's a little easier because you only have to read a couple chapters at a time and put them out there on the web where people can download them and listen to them. And then you do a couple of chapters every week or at a certain specified time interval. But still, it's a lot of work, and I'm not sure what kind of return you get when doing podcasts. I don't know if they're as popular as what they used to be. And now everybody wants audiobooks just because they're straight through, and the professionals that read do a very good job at it.
Well, if I may add one other thing, I'm blessed with having a daughter who knows technology. So she's very good at taking the audio and trimming out what doesn't work kind of thing, and blending and splicing. Splicing is probably an old time term. I'm sure there's a new term in today's world, but I'm blessed that she has those skills too. So that's an extra help for me to maybe go the audio way.
Right. And Sarah's been in the background. She's probably, you could call her our producer for today. And
Yeah, she is.
And I want to one more time thank Debbie
Yes.
Boomer and Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop for hosting this presentation. And I want to thank Bill, thank Cheryl, and all of you who tuned in to listen to this presentation. And come on out to the store, buy our books. We'd love it, and we'd love to be able to personalize them for you. And I believe that's it. So.
Okay,
Goodbye, everybody.
bye.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.